Hello, everybody, and welcome back to part 2 for chapter 11. So we're looking at control, and we were talking then control charts, right? And a control chart is basically made up of your actual versus your schedule and your budgeted versus your actual. So everything in control is about comparing your plan, which was your budget and your schedule, versus the actual results that you are collecting and measuring them. It's a critical ratio. And here applies the term ceteris paribus, right? It's a Latin term that basically means all things being equal, right? So by example, if Coca-Cola and Pepsi are two competing beverage companies, right? And so if all things being equal, Coke and Pepsi are about the same, right? But if the price of Coke falls, right, under the concept ceteris paribus, then the demand will increase, right? Supply and demand. But Pepsi then can counter, maybe reduce their price as well, and in the end, the demand remains unchanged, right? Is an example of control using the concept ceteris paribus. But my Latin is a little rusty, so I'm not sure that's how you say it. Anyhow, as project managers, one of the things we like to do is use a control chart. And one of the other things I make sure that my quality team can do is develop this for me. And I make sure that they have the right statistical training prior to the project. Otherwise, I go out and get that for them. But you can see on the control chart, here is the mean or the average, right? The middle of the road. And what we want is some natural variation, right? Data will rise and fall, ebb and flow. That's okay. As long as it ebbs and flows within our upper and lower control limits, we are still in control. And I mentioned the rule of 7. If I have 7 data points in a row that does not change within the natural variation that we've defined, that actually becomes a problem for me. Because if 7 points in a row aren't changing direction, it tells me that it will be changing my mean. And I didn't intend to do that, right? So that I would call an error, and I would assign a code to it, and I would do root cause analysis on that. And of course, anything that falls above or below any data point, the control limit, the upper control limit or the lower control limit, I would also assign a cause code to that and do root cause analysis, figure out why, and make the recommended changes. In the book, they put it into a control chart view. That is explained well in the literature, so I would go there. Now, another concept in terms of control is benchmarking. In my career in the Air Force, because we were all federal employees, we used to call it stealing good ideas, right? We weren't really stealing. We were all federal employees, and there were no secrets. But if a friend of mine at a different base had a new way to do something, and he or she would win awards doing it, I would ask them to share it with me, and I'd go implement it at my base and win awards, right? I was benchmarking off of their good work, the best practices. So you want to make sure as project managers within your own company, you celebrate best practices. You share your lessons learned, including best practices, with your other project managers and with the program office and other senior leaders. You share your methodology that led you to this approach and the results. And of course, there should be a best practices database within your organization. So as a project manager, central to this control is having a change control system. I mentioned that the number one issue for you throughout most of the project will probably be managing your schedule. But the number one reason projects fail is because of scope. Scope was either not identified or it was not adhered to and followed through to the end. We also have scope creep, scope change issues, and scope gap. Okay, so we want to, but the biggest one is scope creep, right? Where a stakeholder comes to us, somebody we respect or like, and says, hey, this requirement should be in your project. And you go, okay, right? Well, first, is it in alignment with the charter? Okay, yes or no. Does it meet the plan? Is there a regulatory requirement that makes this not just your pet project, but a real requirement on my project, right? And so there are things that lead to scope creep, right? Uncertainty about technology. I get it. Maybe we've learned more in our knowledge base. Maybe some rules were modified within the corporate policy, right? But we want to make sure as project manager, protect your triple constraint. Do not allow requirements in that really aren't in accordance with the business documents, which align with the charter, which aligns with the project plan. Protect it at all cost. And so, but if you do have to do a change, like add a requirement, that's a change to scope management. You'd want to go to a change control board. Well, it starts with a change control system. You set up this system for change. And in a change control system, you'd set up a change control board who are members on the board, who are voting members on the board, which can be different. So you'd have you on the board and a voting member, the sponsor of the project who funds it, the higher senior leader, they will be on the board and a voting member clearly, a functional manager who is your source of expertise, who's reviewed the change, would be on the board and a voting member, right? We've talked all of those organizations already. And you'll want to have an executive summary, right? So we take the data, which is raw, we analyze it to create information, and we summarize it in a report. And that report recommending for or against the change should come out to the board. And the board is going to evaluate the costs and benefits. The good news here is in the terms of control, the project manager isn't solely responsible. You're responsible for identifying the issue, creating the report, but in the end, it's going to be a collective decision by a board, which is good, I think good. And so, because in this collective, it's easier to identify alternatives, right, which help refine the decision and improve it in terms of budget and schedule, right, and scope. You can accept or reject it. You might even postpone it. You don't have to. But either way, you record it in your change control log. So you want a change control system with a change control board and a change control log. Record everything. And then, regardless of the decision of the change board, tell your key stakeholders. Get a message out to them according to your stakeholder analysis and as indicated in your communications management plan. If the change is approved, make sure it gets implemented. So it goes back to several places. Any approved change should go to your quality control team so they can test for it. And it should go to your direct and manage project work team so that it gets implemented in the actual execution of the widget itself. Okay. So some guidelines for some change control procedures. Don't just look at the change. So if you have scope as the issue, don't just look at this change in terms of scope. Look at the change in terms of impact on scope, but all your other knowledge areas too, including risk, communications, stakeholders, scope, schedule, cost, quality, etc. Right? All the knowledge areas. Look at the impact of the change on the collective knowledge areas, right? And if it's approved, issue that change approval and make sure you communicate it again. Yes, the project manager must be consulted because you should be on the change board. It's your board that you are running, okay? Do it in writing, and like I said, have a change control log to record everything. This becomes a primary function of management, you as the project manager being central to it. And you want to proactively identify an issue and bring it to the change board in advance, right? So you could do a change board for actual deviations, true, or for anticipated deviations as well. And we're looking, you'd also do a change board whenever you have defect repair. So in those 3 times, you definitely want to have a change board stand up. I used to do them monthly and also then by emergency use. Okay, and of course, human response to controls. I think we've already talked about the cybernetic go-no and post-control efforts, but it's a balance. It's a balance in the control system, right? Putting your foot on the pedal too hard. Maybe are you emphasizing short run versus long run? Are you favoring project success over product, the long-term life of the product once it's deployed, right? You have to weigh those things. And sometimes there's over-control by management. A good video that I think I've mentioned in the past is the red bead experiment, B-E-A-D, and you can YouTube that and make sure that it's a 9-minute video by Edward Deming, the red bead experiment, and he's trying to demonstrate management's sense of control and why sometimes that leads to misaligned decisions, right? And measure, measure, measure. If you're not measuring it, it is not important to the team. Measure what you want to focus on, okay? So creativity is hard to control, right? So we want to be flexible. We want to allow, especially in my courses of action or my options in the output. And it's because too much control is going to stifle creativity. And we do have to think outside the box, right? In terms of processes and personnel and etc. Okay? So have a formal change control system. Should have at least 3 parts. A change control system describing what you're going to do. Change control board with members and who votes and who doesn't. And a change control log to record it and communicate it out. But the reason I have a change control system is not every change, if it's a massive project, needs to go to the board. Here's an example. If I'm building the Freedom Tower complex in New York City, right, I might get in the my sponsor to agree that any change up to $10,000 I can approve. And every month I'll summarize them and give you, sponsor, a report. Any change between $10,000 and $100,000 would come to you for approval, and any change over $100,000 in this 9-building complex would go to the change control board. See, there's a change control system now that doesn't overburden people and yet allows authority, accountability, and responsibility at the right levels. Okay? I think we've kind of been through these change guidelines, and also don't forget to communicate it to the customer itself. Okay, that wraps it up for Chapter 11. I've enjoyed it. Hope you have too. I will see you online.